The morning sun cast long shadows across the marble corridors of a Thermore palace as Captain Marcus Blackwood made his routine patrol through the East Wing. At 35, he had dedicated 15 years of his life to protecting the royal family, rising through the ranks to become the youngest captain in the Royal Guard's history. His dark blue uniform bore the silver insignia of his position, and his sword never left his side. Princess Elena, now 12 years old, was practicing her archery in the palace gardens, under the watchful eye of her instructor. Her golden hair caught the sunlight as she drew back the bowstring, her concentration absolute. She had grown into a poised young lady despite the challenges that had befallen the royal family in recent years. Queen Regent Victoria stood at her office window, watching the scene below with calculating eyes. She had married into the royal family 5 years ago, becoming stepmother to Princess Elena when she wed King Edmund. However, everything changed when King Edmund died in a tragic hunting accident 2 years prior, leaving Victoria as regent until Elena came of age. Captain Blackwood had always maintained a respectful but distant relationship with Queen Regent Victoria. Something about her demeanor troubled him, though he could never quite articulate what it was. Perhaps it was the way her smile never reached her eyes when she looked at Princess Elena, or how she seemed to relish making decisions that contradicted the late king's wishes. The palace staff whispered among themselves about the growing tension between the Queen Regent and the princess. Elena had begun questioning some of Victoria's decisions regarding the kingdom's affairs, displaying a wisdom beyond her years that clearly irritated her stepmother. The young princess had her father's keen intellect and her mother's compassionate heart, qualities that made the common people adore her. During the weekly council meeting, Captain Blackwood stood at attention near the chamber doors. He watched as Queen Regent Victoria discussed new taxation policies that would burden the already struggling peasants. Princess Elena, who had recently been granted permission to observe these meetings as part of her royal education, spoke up with concern. "Your Majesty," Elena said carefully, "perhaps we could consider reducing the palace's expenses instead of increasing taxes? The people are already facing hardships from the poor harvest." Victoria's face darkened. "Child, you clearly don't understand the complexities of running a kingdom. These decisions require experience you simply don't possess. But Father always said that a ruler's first duty is to protect and serve the people," Elena replied with quiet dignity. The Queen Regent's knuckles whitened as she gripped her chair. "Your father is dead, and I am regent now. You would do well to remember your place." Captain Blackwood noticed several council members shifting uncomfortably in their seats. Lord Chancellor Hamilton, an elderly man who had served 3 kings, cleared his throat diplomatically. "Perhaps your Majesty would consider a compromise, a slight reduction in both palace expenses and a modest tax increase?" Victoria's eyes flashed dangerously. "The decision has been made. Guards, please escort Princess Elena to her chambers. She seems tired and is clearly not ready for such discussions." As 2 guards moved forward, Captain Blackwood felt his jaw tighten. This was not how a loving stepmother should treat her charge, especially not in front of the entire royal council. Princess Elena rose gracefully, her head held high despite the obvious humiliation. "I understand, Your Majesty," Elena said with remarkable composure. "I shall continue my studies and hope to better understand these matters in time." After Elena left, Queen Regent Victoria announced several more controversial decisions. She planned to dismiss several longtime palace servants to reduce costs, though Captain Blackwood knew these were people who had been loyal to the royal family for decades. She also intended to renegotiate trade agreements with neighboring kingdoms, potentially damaging relationships that King Edmund had carefully cultivated. That evening, Captain Blackwood found Princess Elena in the palace library, reading one of her father's favorite books on leadership and governance. She looked up as he approached, her blue eyes reflecting a maturity that saddened him. "Captain Blackwood," she said softly, "may I ask you something?"
"Of course, Your Highness."
"Did my father ever speak to you about his hopes for the kingdom, about what he wanted for our people?" Captain Blackwood chose his words carefully. "Your father was a good king who loved his people deeply. He believed that true strength came from protecting those who couldn't protect themselves." Elena nodded slowly. "I thought so. Sometimes I feel like I'm the only one who remembers what he stood for." "You are not alone, Your Highness. There are many who remember your father's wisdom and see it reflected in you." "Even when I make mistakes in council meetings?" Captain Blackwood smiled gently, especially then. It takes courage to speak up for what's right, even when it's difficult. As he left the library, Captain Blackwood's mind churned with conflicting thoughts. His oath was to protect the royal family, but what happened when members of that family seemed to be working against each other? Princess Elena clearly had her father's best interests for the kingdom at heart, while Queen Regent Victoria appeared more concerned with consolidating her own power. The next morning brought news that would test everyone's loyalties. A messenger arrived with reports of unrest in the outer provinces. The new tax policies had sparked protests among the farmers and merchants, and local governors were requesting guidance on how to respond. Queen Regent Victoria called an emergency council meeting. "These rebellious peasants need to be reminded of their place," she declared. "I want additional troops sent to quell any disturbances immediately." Lord Chancellor Hamilton leaned forward. "Your Majesty, perhaps if we reconsidered the tax increase." "Absolutely not," Victoria snapped. "We cannot show weakness by backing down at the first sign of resistance." Captain Blackwood exchanged glances with several other guards. Using military force against starving citizens seemed not only cruel, but strategically foolish. It would only breed more resentment and potentially spark a larger rebellion. Princess Elena, who had been allowed to attend this emergency meeting, raised her hand tentatively. "Your Majesty, what if we sent aid instead of soldiers? If the people are struggling because of the poor harvest, perhaps we could distribute grain from the royal stores." Victoria's face flushed with anger. "Your naive suggestions are becoming tiresome, Elena. Guards, escort the princess to her chambers immediately." But this time, Captain Blackwood hesitated. The other guards looked to him uncertainly, waiting for his lead as the senior officer present. In that moment of hesitation, something fundamental shifted in the room. "Captain Blackwood," Victoria said sharply, "I gave you an order." "I heard you, Your Majesty," he replied slowly, his hand instinctively moving to rest on his sword hilt. "However, I must respectfully point out that Princess Elena is the rightful heir to the throne. Perhaps her suggestions deserve consideration rather than dismissal." The silence that followed was deafening. Victoria's eyes narrowed to slits as she stared at the captain who had just publicly questioned her authority. "Are you refusing to follow my direct order, Captain?" Captain Blackwood straightened his shoulders. "I am suggesting that we remember our true duty is to serve the crown and the people of Ethermore. Princess Elena represents both." The battle lines had been drawn. Queen Regent Victoria had made it clear that she would not tolerate any challenges to her authority, while Captain Blackwood had chosen to stand with Princess Elena and the principles her father had embodied. The other council members watched in stunned silence as the foundation of palace politics cracked beneath their feet. "Very well," Victoria said coldly. "Captain Blackwood, you are relieved of your duties, effective immediately. Guards, arrest this insubordinate officer." But when Victoria looked around the chamber, she realized that most of the guards present answered to Captain Blackwood's authority. They stood frozen, torn between their respect for their captain and their duty to obey the regent's commands. Princess Elena stepped forward, her young voice carrying surprising authority. "Please, let's not let this situation escalate further. Captain Blackwood has served our family loyally for many years." Victoria whirled on her stepdaughter. "You will return to your chambers immediately, or I will have you physically removed." "I don't think that will be necessary," Captain Blackwood said firmly, positioning himself slightly in front of Princess Elena. "Her Highness has done nothing wrong." The confrontation had reached a tipping point that would change the fate of the kingdom forever. The tension in the council chamber was suffocating as Queen Regent Victoria faced off against Captain Blackwood and Princess Elena. The other nobles and guards remained frozen, unsure which side to support in this unprecedented confrontation. The morning light streaming through the tall windows seemed to highlight the divide that had split the royal court in two. Victoria's face had turned pale with rage, but her voice remained dangerously controlled. "Captain Blackwood, you have just committed treason against the crown. The penalty for such an offense is death. The crown belongs to Princess Elena," Captain Blackwood replied steadily. "I serve the rightful ruler of Ethermore, not a regent who has forgotten her place." Princess Elena placed a gentle hand on the captain's arm. "Please, both of you, this argument serves no one. We should be working together for the good of our people." But Victoria was beyond reasoning. The years of carefully building her power base, of slowly pushing Elena aside while consolidating control over the kingdom, had been threatened by a simple act of defiance. She could not allow this challenge to go unpunished. "Sir Garrett," she called to the deputy captain, a nervous young man who had always been ambitious but lacked Blackwood's natural leadership. "Arrest Captain Blackwood immediately for treason." Sir Garrett looked between his superior officer and the Queen Regent, sweat beading on his forehead. The other guards in the room shifted uncomfortably, their hands hovering near their weapons but uncertain who they would draw them against. "Sir Garrett," Captain Blackwood said calmly, "remember your oath. We swore to protect the royal family and serve the crown. Ask yourself who truly represents those values." Before Sir Garrett could respond, Lord Chancellor Hamilton stood up slowly, his age-spotted hands trembling slightly. "Your Majesty, perhaps we should postpone this discussion until cooler heads can prevail. These are serious accusations being thrown about." "Sit down, old man," Victoria snapped. "Your counsel is no longer welcome here either." The insult to the respected elder statesman sent ripples of shock through the chamber. Lord Chancellor Hamilton had served the kingdom faithfully for 40 years, and his wisdom was renowned throughout the realm. Several other council members looked appalled at Victoria's disrespectful treatment of their colleague. "Your Majesty," ventured Lord Adrian Westmarch, a middle-aged noble who controlled significant lands in the northern provinces, "perhaps Captain Blackwood raises valid concerns about the kingdom's direction." Victoria's eyes blazed as she realized that support for her position was crumbling. "Anyone else who wishes to commit treason is welcome to speak now. I'll deal with you all accordingly." Princess Elena stepped forward again, displaying courage that belied her young age. "Stepmother, please listen to reason. Our kingdom is facing serious challenges. The people are struggling, unrest is growing, and now we're fighting among ourselves. This is not what Father would have wanted." "Don't you dare tell me what your father would have wanted," Victoria hissed. "Edmund is dead, and I am regent. My word is law until you come of age, and I'm beginning to think that day may be longer in coming than originally planned." The threat was clear to everyone in the room. Victoria was suggesting she might try to extend her regency beyond Elena's 18th birthday, potentially keeping the young princess from ever claiming her rightful throne. Captain Blackwood's hand tightened on his sword hilt. "Your Majesty, I believe you've revealed your true intentions. You never plan to step down when Princess Elena comes of age." "That's enough!" Victoria screamed, her careful composure finally cracking completely. "Guards! I want Captain Blackwood in chains, immediately!" But when she looked around the chamber, she realized that none of the guards were moving to obey her commands. They all looked to Captain Blackwood, waiting for his orders instead. "It appears your authority isn't as absolute as you believed," Captain Blackwood observed quietly. Sir Garrett finally found his voice, though it shook with nervousness. "Captain, what are your orders?" The question hung in the air like a sword waiting to fall. Everyone in the room understood that Captain Blackwood's next words would determine whether this confrontation ended peacefully or erupted into violence that could tear the kingdom apart. "No one is to be arrested today," Captain Blackwood declared. "We will escort Princess Elena to her chambers for her own safety while we sort this out properly." "You cannot defy me," Victoria shrieked. "I am the Queen Regent." "You are regent in name only," Lord Chancellor Hamilton said quietly, his voice carrying the weight of his years and experience. "A regent's authority comes from the consent of the governed and the nobility. If you have lost both, then your position becomes questionable."
Victoria whirled to face the elderly chancellor.
"Are you threatening me, old man?" "I am simply stating legal facts, Your Majesty. The regency was established to protect Princess Elena's interests until she could claim the throne. If the regent is acting against those interests, then the arrangement must be reconsidered." "Sir Garrett," Victoria commanded desperately, "as deputy captain, you outrank these traitors. Order them to arrest Captain Blackwood." But Sir Garrett had seen which way the wind was blowing. The guards clearly supported their captain. The nobles were turning against the regent, and Princess Elena had shown more dignity and wisdom in this confrontation than Victoria had displayed in years of rule. "I'm sorry, Your Majesty," Sir Garrett said quietly, "but I cannot order the arrest of Captain Blackwood without proper cause and due process." Victoria's face went white with shock. She had lost control of the situation completely, and everyone in the room knew it. Princess Elena moved to the center of the chamber, drawing everyone's attention. Despite her youth, she carried herself with the natural authority of someone born to rule. "I propose we take a recess," she said calmly. "Clearly, there are serious issues that need to be addressed, but they should be addressed through proper channels, not through threats and accusations." "Wise counsel, Your Highness," Lord Chancellor Hamilton agreed. "Perhaps a full assembly of the nobility should be convened to discuss these matters properly." "No!" Victoria shouted. "I forbid any such assembly. I am regent, and my word is final." But her words rang hollow in the chamber. Captain Blackwood stepped forward, his presence commanding respect from everyone present. "Your Majesty," he said formally, "I respectfully suggest you retire to consider your position. The Royal Guard will ensure Princess Elena's safety while these matters are resolved." The implication was clear. Captain Blackwood and his guards would protect Princess Elena from any further attempts at intimidation or harm. Victoria looked around the chamber one last time, seeing opposition on every face. "This isn't over," she said coldly. "I still have allies in this kingdom, and I will not be pushed aside by a child and her protectors." As she swept from the chamber, her silk gown billowing behind her, everyone present understood that the real battle was just beginning. Victoria would not give up her power easily, and she still controlled significant resources and had connections outside the immediate palace circle. "Captain," Princess Elena said quietly after Victoria had left, "what happens now?" Captain Blackwood considered his words carefully. "Now we prepare for whatever comes next, Your Highness. Your stepmother will not accept this defeat easily." Lord Chancellor Hamilton approached them, his expression grave. "Captain Blackwood is correct. Victoria still has supporters among certain noble houses, particularly those who have benefited from her policies. She may try to rally them to her cause." "What kind of support does she have?" Princess Elena asked. "The Duke of Ironhold has always been ambitious and might see advantage in supporting her," Lord Adrian Westmarch said thoughtfully. "She's also cultivated relationships with several merchant guilds who profit from her trade policies." Captain Blackwood nodded grimly. "And she has her own personal guards, men who owe their positions to her rather than to the crown." Princess Elena looked around at the faces surrounding her, seeing concern but also determination. "Then we must be prepared to defend what's right, no matter the cost."
"Your Highness," Captain Blackwood said firmly,
"I swear to you that the Royal Guard will protect you and uphold your father's legacy." As the council members began to disperse, making quiet plans and sending discreet messages to their own allies, Captain Blackwood realized that what had started as a simple confrontation had become the opening move in a much larger conflict. Victoria would not give up easily, and the Kingdom of Ethermore was about to face its greatest internal crisis in generations. 3 days had passed since the confrontation in the council chamber, and the palace had become a place of whispered conversations and careful alliances. Queen Regent Victoria had retreated to her private quarters in the West Wing, but her absence from public view only made her more dangerous. Captain Blackwood had tripled the guard around Princess Elena's chambers and had his most trusted men watching every entrance to the palace. Victoria sat in her opulent sitting room, surrounded by maps, letters, and ledgers. She had not been idle during her apparent retreat. Messages had been sent throughout the kingdom to nobles she believed would support her cause, and she had been reviewing the kingdom's military positions and financial resources. Her personal secretary, a thin, nervous man named Master Aldrich, entered with yet another stack of correspondence. "Your Majesty, responses are arriving from your messages." Victoria snatched the letters eagerly, her eyes scanning them quickly. The first was from Duke Roderick of Ironhold, a powerful lord whose lands contained the kingdom's most important iron mines and weapons forges. "My dear Regina Victoria," the letter began, using her given name rather than her title. "Your message regarding the recent disturbances at court was most illuminating. I have long been concerned about the influence of certain elements who seem to prioritize sentiment over strength. The kingdom requires firm leadership, not the naive idealism of youth. You may count on my support in whatever measures become necessary to restore proper order." Victoria smiled coldly as she read. Duke Roderick had always been pragmatic above all else, and he understood that her policies favored his business interests. The second letter came from Countess Mirabelle of the Eastern Provinces, a woman who had built her power through careful manipulation. She wrote, "The recent events you describe trouble me greatly. Young princesses can be easily influenced by romantic notions that ignore political realities. Perhaps it would be wise to ensure Princess Elena receives proper guidance away from certain corrupting influences until she matures enough to understand her responsibilities." Victoria's smile widened. Countess Mirabelle was suggesting that Elena should be removed from Captain Blackwood's influence, possibly by sending her away from the capital entirely. The third letter, however, was disappointing. Lord Marcus of the southern borderlands wrote tersely, "I have sworn loyalty to the royal line and will honor that oath. I cannot support any action that might harm Princess Elena's legitimate claims to the throne." Fool, Victoria muttered, tossing the letter aside. But she still had enough support to make her next moves possible. Master Aldrich cleared his throat nervously. "Your Majesty, there's also this." He handed her a sealed message bearing the insignia of the Merchants' Guild of the capital city. Victoria broke the seal eagerly. The guild had profited enormously from her trade policies, and their support would provide both financial resources and influence among the common people of the capital. "Honored Regent," the message read, "we are deeply concerned by reports of instability at court. Our business interests require predictable leadership, and we fear that radical changes might disrupt the profitable arrangements currently in place. The Guild stands ready to support legitimate authority against those who would sow chaos for their own purposes." Victoria set the letter down with satisfaction. Between Duke Roderick's military resources, Countess Mirabelle's political connections, and the Merchants' Guild's financial power, she had the foundation of a serious coalition. Meanwhile, in the east wing of the palace, Princess Elena was holding her own series of meetings, though hers were characterized by earnest discussion rather than conspiracy. Captain Blackwood stood at attention near the window while Lord Chancellor Hamilton sat across from the young princess at a simple wooden table. "Your Highness," the elderly chancellor said gently, "you must understand the gravity of our situation. Your stepmother is not merely angry about being contradicted in council, she sees you as a threat to her continued power." Elena nodded thoughtfully. "I understand, Lord Chancellor, but what can we do? She is still the regent until I reach my majority." "That's precisely what we need to discuss," Captain Blackwood interjected. "There are legal precedents for removing a regent who acts against the interests of the crown heir." Lord Chancellor Hamilton pulled out a thick, leather-bound volume. "Indeed. The laws of succession are quite clear that a regent's authority exists solely to preserve and protect the heir's interests. If it can be demonstrated that the regent is acting contrary to those interests, the nobility can petition to have the regency terminated." "But would the nobles support such a petition?" Elena asked. Captain Blackwood had been thinking about this question for days. "We've already seen support from Lord Adrian Westmarch and several other council members. The key will be reaching out to nobles throughout the kingdom who remember your father fondly and share his values. I've already sent discreet messages to several houses," Lord Chancellor Hamilton admitted. "Lord Marcus of the southern borderlands has confirmed his loyalty to you. The Duke of Greenwood has also expressed concerns about the current direction of royal policy." Elena stood up and walked to the window looking out at the palace gardens where she had often played as a child. "This feels like we're planning some sort of rebellion. Is this really the only way?" "Your Highness," Captain Blackwood said gently, "your stepmother has made it clear she will not listen to reason. When she threatened to extend your regency indefinitely, she revealed that she never intended to honor your rightful claim to the throne." "He's right," Lord Chancellor Hamilton agreed. "Victoria has overplayed her hand. By threatening you publicly and trying to have Captain Blackwood arrested for doing his duty, she has shown her true nature to the court." Elena turned back to face them, her young face set with determination. "Then we must act, but we must act honorably. I won't claim the throne through deception or violence." "Of course not, Your Highness," the Chancellor assured her. "Everything we do will be completely legal and according to established precedent." At that moment, Sir Garrett entered the room, his expression urgent. "Captain, Your Highness, I've received disturbing reports from our scouts. Captain Blackwood straightened. What kind of reports? Armed men have been seen moving toward the capital from Duke Roderick's lands. They're wearing his colors but trying to travel discreetly. The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Victoria wasn't just building political support. She was preparing for the possibility of armed conflict. How many men? Captain Blackwood asked grimly. At least 200, possibly more. They should reach the capital within 2 days if they maintain their current pace. Lord Chancellor Hamilton looked alarmed. This is far more serious than I anticipated. If Victoria is bringing in foreign troops, they're not foreign, Captain Blackwood corrected. Duke Roderick is a vassal of the crown, but if he's moving armed forces without royal permission, it's still a serious violation of the kingdom's laws. Princess Elena sat down heavily, the weight of the situation pressing on her shoulders. She's really going to try to take the throne by force. Not take it, Captain Blackwood said. Keep it. From her perspective, she already has the throne. She's trying to prevent you from claiming what's rightfully yours. What are our options? Elena asked. Captain Blackwood considered carefully. The Royal Guard currently numbers about 150 men here at the palace. Most are loyal to you rather than to Victoria. But if Duke Roderick brings 200 men, we'd be outnumbered. However, Lord Chancellor Hamilton interjected. We may have more support than we realize. If we can get word to the nobles who oppose Victoria's policies, some of them might bring their own forces to protect you. Sir Garrett shifted uncomfortably. Captain, there's something else. Some of the guards are beginning to waver. Victoria's supporters have been spreading rumors that supporting you means defying legitimate authority. What kind of rumors? Elena asked. They're saying that Captain Blackwood has convinced you to rebel against your rightful regent, and that anyone who supports this rebellion will be branded as traitors when order is restored. Captain Blackwood felt a cold knot forming in his stomach. Victoria was cleverer than he had given her credit for. By framing their actions as rebellion rather than legitimate resistance, she was putting doubt in the minds of men who took their oaths seriously. We need to counter those rumors immediately, he decided. Sir Garrett, I want you to speak personally with every guard. Remind them of their oath to protect the royal line. Princess Elena eyes the royal line. Yes, Captain. As Sir Garrett left, Princess Elena looked at her remaining advisors with troubled eyes. Are we doing the right thing? What if we're wrong about Victoria's intentions? Lord Chancellor Hamilton reached across and patted her hand gently. Your Highness, I have served 3 kings in my time. I learned to recognize the difference between those who serve the crown and those who serve only themselves. Your stepmother has revealed which category she belongs to. Captain Blackwood nodded in agreement. Your father trusted me to protect you, Your Highness. That's exactly what I intend to do, regardless of the consequences. Elena looked at these 2 men who had chosen to stand with her despite the risks, and felt a surge of gratitude mixed with determination. Then we proceed carefully but firmly. We document every illegal action Victoria takes, we gather support from loyal nobles, and we prepare to defend ourselves if necessary. Agreed, said Lord Chancellor Hamilton, but we must move quickly. If Duke Roderick's forces reach the capital before we're ready, we may lose the initiative entirely. As evening fell over the palace, both sides were preparing for a confrontation that would determine the future of the kingdom of Ethermore. Victoria had wealth, political connections, and possibly superior military force. But Elena had legitimacy, the loyalty of good men, and the support of those who believed in justice over power. The stage was set for a conflict that would test everything King Edmund had built and everything Princess Elena hoped to preserve. The dawn broke gray and cloudy over the capital city of Ethermore as Duke Roderick's forces took position just outside the city walls. Captain Blackwood stood on the palace battlements, his spyglass trained on the armed encampment that had appeared overnight like a hostile growth on the peaceful landscape. The Duke had moved faster than anticipated, and his numbers were larger than the scouts had reported. At least 300 men, he murmured to Sir Garrett, who stood beside him with a grim expression. And they're well equipped. Below in the courtyard, Princess Elena was addressing the assembled royal guard. Despite her youth, she had insisted on speaking to them personally, rather than hiding in her chambers while others fought on her behalf. Her voice carried clearly in the morning air, strong despite the tremor that betrayed her nervousness. "Men of the Royal Guard," she began. "I stand before you not as someone seeking power, but as someone fighting to preserve the values my father held dear. You swore an oath to protect the crown and serve the people of this kingdom. I ask you to remember that oath today." The guards listened intently, many of them veterans who had served under King Edmund and remembered his fairness and wisdom. Elena continued, "I know some of you have heard rumors that we are rebels acting against lawful authority, but ask yourselves this: what is more lawful, following orders to harm the rightful heir to the throne, or protecting that heir from those who would steal her birthright?" A murmur of agreement rippled through the assembled men. Captain Blackwood felt a surge of pride at Elena's courage and eloquence. Meanwhile, in the west wing of the palace, Queen Regent Victoria was meeting with her own supporters. Duke Roderick had arrived before dawn, slipping into the palace through a side entrance to avoid detection. He was a large, imposing man with graying hair and cold blue eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. "Your Majesty," he said, though his tone held little of the respect the title usually commanded, "my men are in position. We can have control of the palace within the hour if you give the word." Victoria nodded but held up a hand. "Not yet, Duke. First, we must try to end this without bloodshed. It would be better if Princess Elena and her supporters surrender peacefully. And if they refuse, then we will do what must be done to restore order," Victoria replied coldly. Countess Mirabelle, who had arrived during the night with a contingent of her own guards, leaned forward from her chair. "The merchants in the city are growing nervous about this standoff. They fear that fighting in the palace will spread to the streets and damage their businesses. Then they should pressure Elena to surrender," Victoria said dismissively. But Duke Roderick frowned. "Actually, Your Majesty, that might work against us. If the merchants and common people see this as a choice between Elena and you, they're likely to choose her. She's popular with them because of her concern for their welfare." Victoria's jaw tightened. She had not considered how public opinion might affect the outcome of this confrontation. "What do you suggest?" "We frame this differently," the Duke replied. "We're not taking the throne from Elena. We're protecting it from those who would manipulate her. Captain Blackwood and the others have obviously filled her head with dangerous ideas that threaten the stability of the kingdom." Countess Mirabelle nodded approvingly. "Exactly. We paint Elena as an innocent victim of ambitious men who are using her for their own purposes." Victoria considered this strategy. It had the advantage of allowing her to maintain her position while appearing to act in Elena's best interests. "Very well. We'll demand that Elena dismiss Captain Blackwood and his co-conspirators. Once they're gone, she can remain as princess under proper guidance until she comes of age." But even as she spoke, Victoria had no intention of ever allowing Elena to truly come of age politically. The young princess had already shown too much independence and too much of her father's inconvenient moral character. Back in the East Wing, Princess Elena was meeting with her own council of supporters. Lord Chancellor Hamilton had worked through the night sending and receiving messages from nobles throughout the kingdom, and the responses were encouraging. Lord William of the Western Mountains has pledged his support and is riding here with 50 men, he reported. Duke Thomas of Greenwood is also coming, though his forces won't arrive until tomorrow. Captain Blackwood studied the map spread before them. "That helps, but we're still outnumbered for now. We need to buy time until our reinforcements arrive." "What about the city guard?" asked Sir Garrett. "Captain Morrison commands about 200 men in the capital. I sent a message to Captain Morrison this morning," Elena replied. "He's requested permission to speak with me personally before deciding where his loyalty lies." "That's promising," Lord Chancellor Hamilton noted. "Morrison is an honorable man who served your father well." At that moment, a commotion in the courtyard drew their attention to the windows. A herald bearing Queen Regent Victoria's banner was approaching under a flag of truce, accompanied by 2 guards. Captain Blackwood sighed. "She's making her formal demands. We'd better hear what she has to say." They gathered in the main hall as the herald was escorted in. He was a young man who looked deeply uncomfortable with his assignment, and his voice shook slightly as he unrolled his proclamation. "By order of Her Majesty Queen Regent Victoria, lawful ruler of Aethermore," he began, "Princess Elena is commanded to immediately dismiss Captain Marcus Blackwood, and all other advisors who have led her into rebellion against royal authority. Upon compliance with this order, Princess Elena will be pardoned for her part in this treasonous conspiracy and allowed to resume her rightful place as heir to the throne." The herald paused, then continued with even less conviction. "Failure to comply within 1 hour will result in the arrest of all conspirators and the placement of Princess Elena under protective custody until she can be properly educated in her royal duties." Princess Elena stepped forward, her chin raised defiantly. "You may tell Queen Regent Victoria that I do not recognize her authority to make such demands. Captain Blackwood and Lord Chancellor Hamilton are loyal servants of the Crown who have advised me according to their oaths and their conscience." The herald shifted nervously. "Your Highness, please consider the consequences of defiance. The Queen Regent has significant forces at her disposal, and I have justice on my side," Elena replied firmly. "You may tell my stepmother that if she wishes to discuss these matters, she is welcome to come herself rather than sending threatening messages through intermediaries." As the herald departed, Captain Blackwood felt both admiration and worry. Elena was showing remarkable courage, but courage alone might not be enough against superior numbers and political maneuvering. "Captain Morrison is here," Sir Garrett announced, entering the hall. Captain Morrison was a weathered veteran in his 50s, who commanded respect throughout the capital. His uniform was simple but immaculate, and his bearing suggested a man who took his responsibilities seriously. "Your Highness," he said, bowing formally to Elena, "I've come to assess the situation personally before making my decision." "I appreciate your honesty, Captain Morrison," Elena replied. "What would you like to know?" Morrison looked around the room, taking in the faces of Elena's supporters. "I need to understand what this conflict is really about. I've heard claims from both sides, but I want to hear the truth from you personally." Elena took a deep breath and began explaining the events that had led to this confrontation. She spoke honestly about her disagreements with Victoria's policies, about the confrontation in the council chamber, and about her fears that Victoria never intended to relinquish power when Elena came of age. Captain Morrison listened intently, asking pointed questions about specific incidents and policies. He was particularly interested in Elena's plans for the kingdom if she were to assume power immediately. "Your Highness," he said finally, "I served your father faithfully for many years. He was a good king who cared about his people. From what I've observed, you share his values and his concern for justice." Elena felt her heart racing as she waited for his decision. "The city guard will support your claim to the throne," Morrison declared. "But I have one condition." "What is that?" Elena asked. "If we're going to do this, we do it right. No violence unless absolutely necessary. And we make sure the people understand that this is about protecting the rightful succession, not about a power grab." Captain Blackwood stepped forward. "Agreed completely, Captain Morrison. Our goal is to preserve the legitimate order, not to destroy it." As Captain Morrison left to mobilize the city guard, Elena felt the first stirrings of real hope. With the city guard's support, they now had roughly equal numbers to Victoria's coalition, and reinforcements were on their way. But Victoria was not finished with her schemes. Even as Elena's supporters were celebrating their new alliance, the Queen Regent was putting the final pieces of her own plan into motion. She had one last card to play, and it was one that Elena would never see coming. The hour of ultimatum was approaching, and both sides were preparing for whatever would come next. The hour of ultimatum had passed, and an eerie quiet settled over the palace as both sides prepared for what seemed like inevitable conflict. Princess Elena stood in the throne room, gazing up at her father's portrait that hung behind the ancient seat of power. The painted eyes seemed to watch her with a mixture of pride and concern, as if King Edmund himself were weighing her choices. Captain Blackwood entered quietly, his armor gleaming despite the tension of the moment. "Your Highness, our scouts report that Victoria's forces are taking defensive positions around the West Wing. They're not advancing, which suggests she's waiting for something." Elena turned from the portrait, her young face showing a maturity that had been forced upon her by circumstances. What could she be waiting for? Before Captain Blackwood could answer, Sir Garrett burst into the throne room with urgent news. "Captain, your Highness, a messenger has arrived from the kingdom of Drakmore to the east. He bears urgent correspondence for Queen Regent Victoria." Elena and Captain Blackwood exchanged alarmed glances. Drakemore was Athenamore's most powerful neighbor, and their involvement could shift the entire balance of the conflict. "What does the message concern?" Captain Blackwood asked. "The messenger won't say, 'Sir,' but he's accompanied by an armed escort of 20 men. They're requesting immediate audience with the Queen Regent." Elena felt a chill of apprehension. Victoria has been reaching out beyond our borders. She must have promised Drakmore something in exchange for their support. Lord Chancellor Hamilton, who had been coordinating communications with their supporters throughout the kingdom, hurried into the throne room with additional troubling news. "Your Highness, I've received word from our allies. Duke Thomas of Greenwood's forces have been delayed by a suspicious bridge collapse on the main road. Lord William's men encountered a landslide blocking the mountain pass." Captain Blackwood's expression darkened. "Those aren't coincidences. Victoria has been planning this confrontation much longer than we realized. She's been systematically isolating us," Elena realized, "delaying our reinforcements while bringing in her own support from outside the kingdom." The sound of marching feet echoed through the palace corridors, and Sir Garrett peered out the window. "The Drakmore soldiers are being escorted to the West Wing. Whatever Victoria promised them, they seem eager to collect." Elena walked to the great window that overlooked the capital city. In the distance, she could see crowds of citizens gathered in the market square, clearly aware that something momentous was happening at the palace. Their faces were turned toward the royal residence with expressions of worry and anticipation. "Captain Morrison's men are taking positions throughout the city," Captain Blackwood reported, following her gaze. "The people are nervous, but they seem to be supporting us rather than Victoria." "That may not matter if Drakmore has promised military support to Victoria," Lord Chancellor Hamilton said grimly. "King Aldrich of Drakmore has always been ambitious. He might see this as an opportunity to influence Ethermore's policies or even to claim territory along our borders." Elena closed her eyes, feeling the weight of the crown she had not yet officially claimed. Every decision she made now would affect not just her own fate, but the future of everyone in the kingdom. A commotion outside the throne room announced the arrival of another messenger, this one bearing familiar colors. It was Master Willem, the palace's head steward, looking flustered and concerned. "Your Highness," he said, bowing hastily, "Queen Regent Victoria requests an immediate meeting between you and a representative of the Kingdom of Drakmore. She says the matter is of utmost urgency and affects the security of the realm." Elena looked at her advisors, reading caution in their faces. "What kind of representative?" "Prince Corwin of Drakmore, Your Highness, the king's younger brother." The name sent another chill through the room. Prince Corwin was known throughout the neighboring kingdoms as a skilled diplomat and a dangerous man to have as an enemy. "This could be a trap," Captain Blackwood warned. "Victoria might be planning to have you arrested or worse during the meeting, but it could also be our chance to learn what Victoria has promised Drakmore," Elena countered. "We need to understand the full scope of what we're facing." Lord Chancellor Hamilton stroked his beard thoughtfully. "Prince Corwin's presence suggests that this involves more than just military support. The Drakmore royal family doesn't send princes for simple agreements." Elena made her decision with the decisive authority her father had always shown in crisis moments. "I'll meet with Prince Corwin, but on neutral ground. The Great Hall, with representatives from both sides present as witnesses." "Your Highness," Captain Blackwood protested, the risk of not knowing Victoria's full plan is greater than the risk of facing whatever Prince Corwin has to say." Elena interrupted firmly. "Besides, if Victoria wanted to harm me directly, she could have done so already. She needs this conflict to appear legitimate." 2 hours later, the Great Hall buzzed with tension as both sides gathered for the crucial meeting. Victoria entered first, flanked by Duke Roderick and Countess Mirabelle, her bearing regal despite the circumstances. She wore her most elaborate gown and all her royal jewels, clearly intending to emphasize her current authority. Prince Corwin followed, and Elena had to admit he was as imposing as his reputation suggested. Tall and lean, with penetrating dark eyes, he carried himself with the confidence of someone accustomed to wielding power behind the scenes. His diplomatic smile revealed nothing of his true intentions. Elena entered last, accompanied by Captain Blackwood and Lord Chancellor Hamilton. She had chosen to wear a simple but elegant dress in the royal blue of Ethermore, with only her father's ring as ornament. The contrast between her understated dignity and Victoria's ostentatious display was striking. Prince Corwin stepped forward and bowed formally. "Your Royal Highness Princess Elena, Your Majesty Queen Regent Victoria, I bring greetings from His Majesty King Aldrich of Drakmoor and a proposition that may resolve this unfortunate conflict." "We are honored by your presence, Prince Corwin. What proposition does your brother offer?" "King Aldrich is deeply concerned about the instability in Ethermore," Prince Corwin began, his voice smooth and cultured. "Such conflicts inevitably affect neighboring kingdoms through disrupted trade and the movement of refugees. Therefore, His Majesty proposes a solution that would benefit all parties." Victoria leaned forward eagerly, clearly anticipating support for her position. "Princess Elena," Prince Corwin continued, "you are young and inexperienced in the complexities of rule. Queen Regent Victoria, while capable, faces challenges to her authority that weaken the kingdom. King Aldrich therefore proposes a marriage alliance that would strengthen both kingdoms and provide Princess Elena with experienced guidance." Elena felt her blood turn cold as she realized what was coming. "I have the honor to propose marriage between Princess Elena and myself," Prince Corwin announced. "Such an alliance would unite our kingdoms, provide Princess Elena with a husband capable of helping her rule, and create stability that benefits everyone." The hall erupted in stunned whispers. Elena stared at Prince Corwin in shock, then turned her gaze to Victoria, who was smiling with smug satisfaction. "This proposal," Victoria said sweetly, "offers an excellent solution to our current difficulties. Princess Elena would gain the throne as is her right, but with proper guidance from an experienced royal husband." Elena found her voice. "And what would happen to Ethermore's independence in this arrangement?" Prince Corwin's smile didn't waver. "Naturally, there would be closer cooperation between our kingdoms. Some policies would need to be coordinated for mutual benefit. In other words," Captain Blackwood said coldly, "Ethermore would become a vassal state of Drakmoor." "That's a harsh way to put it," Prince Corwin replied. "I prefer to think of it as a beneficial partnership." Elena stood up slowly, her mind racing. This was Victoria's masterstroke. If Elena refused the marriage proposal, Victoria could claim she was rejecting a reasonable solution to the crisis out of childish stubbornness. If she accepted, she would be trading her kingdom's independence for her throne. "Prince Corwin," Elena said carefully, "I appreciate the honor of your proposal. However, this is a matter that requires careful consideration. Surely you understand that I cannot make such a momentous decision hastily?" "Of course," Prince Corwin replied. "However, King Aldrich has instructed me to convey that his offer comes with certain time constraints. The instability in Ethermore threatens regional peace, and he cannot allow it to continue indefinitely." The threat was diplomatically phrased but unmistakably clear. "Accept the proposal quickly, or face Drakmoor's military intervention." Victoria leaned back in her chair with satisfaction. "As Princess Elena considers this generous proposal, I suggest we suspend any hostile actions between our domestic factions. After all, we may soon all be working together for Ethermore's benefit." Elena looked around the great hall at the faces watching her. She saw calculation in Victoria's eyes, confidence in Prince Corwin's bearing, and concern in Captain Blackwood's expression. The weight of the crown had never felt heavier than in this moment when she didn't yet wear it. "I will give you my answer at sunset," Elena announced. "Until then, let there be peace between all parties." As the meeting dispersed, Elena knew she faced the most crucial decision of her life. She could accept the marriage and save her people from war, but lose her kingdom's independence. She could refuse and fight, but risk devastating conflict with uncertain outcome. Or perhaps, with the wisdom her father had tried to teach her, she could find a third path that no one expected. The sun was already beginning its descent toward the horizon, and with it, the deadline for a choice that would determine the fate of the kingdom of Ethermore.